Hello everyone, welcome back to the next video. In this video we will be looking into this blog post from NextJS. So NextJS just had NextJS conf and they have just released their caching journey. So let's have a look at it. So front-end performance can be hard to get right. Even in highly optimized apps, the most common culprit by far is the client-server waterfalls. When introducing NextJS app router, we knew we wanted to solve the issue. To do that, we needed to move the client server REST fetches to the server using React server component in a single round trip. This meant that the server had to do sometimes be dynamic, sacrificing the great initial loading performance of Jamstack. We've built partial pre-rendering to solve this trade-off and have the best of both worlds. However, along the way, the developer experience suffered due to the caching defaults and control we provided. The default for fetch changed to favor performance by caching by default, but quick prototyping and highly dynamic apps suffered. We didn't provide enough control over local database access that wasn't using fetch. We had unstable cache, but it wasn't ergonomic. This led to the need for segment level configs such as export const dynamic runtime fetch cache dynamic params revalidate as an escape hash. We will continue supporting that for backward compatibility, of course, but for a moment I would like you to forget about all that. We think we have an idea for something simpler. We have been cooking on a new experimental mode that builds on just two concepts: suspense and use cache. Choose your adventure. The first thing you will notice is that when you add data to your components, you will now get an error. So something like this will return an error, and here you will have to do export default async function page return component. Okay, to use data, cookies, headers, current time or random values. Now you have a choice. Do you want that data to be cached server or client side or executed on every request? I am using fetch as an example, but this applies to any async node API such as database or timer. Dynamic: if you are still iterating or building a highly dynamic dashboard, you can wrap the component in a suspense boundary. Suspense opts into dynamic data fetching and streaming. So something like this, no error, and here you can wrap it with suspense. You can also do this inside your root layout or use loading.tsx. This ensures that the shell of your app remains instant. You can continue adding more data inside your page, knowing it will all be dynamic by default. Nothing is cached by default, no more hidden caches. If you are building something static and don't want to use dynamic functionality, you can use the new cache directive. So you can use something like this. By making the page with use cache, you are indicating that the entire segment should be cached. This means any data you fetch can now be cached, allowing the page to be statically rendered. No suspense boundary is used for static content. You can add more data to the page and it will all be cached. Partial: you can also mix and match. For example, you put use cache in your root layout to ensure it is cached. Each layout or page can be cached independently. So here they have used this use cache. Here they are calling an API, they are getting it, and they are just displaying it. While using dynamic data within a specific page, they have imported suspense and they are just importing the component which they have. Cached function: when using a hybrid function approach like this, it might be more convenient to add caching closer to the API call. You can add use cache to any async function, just like you use server. Think of it as a server action, but instead of calling a server, you are calling a cache. It supports the same rich type of arguments and return values beyond just JSON. The cache key automatically includes any argument and closure, so you don't need to specify a cache key manually. So here is our use cache, and here we are returning all the data, and here is our HTML layout. Since no other data was used in this layout, it can remain static. A benefit of this approach is that if you accidentally add new dynamic data to the layout, it will trigger an error during the build, forcing you to make a new choice. If you add use cache to the entire layout, it will be cached with no error. Which approach you choose depends on your use case. Tagging a cache: if you want to explicitly clear a cache entry by tag, you can use the new cache tag API inside the use cache function. So yeah, you can use something like this. Then just call revalidate tag my tag from a server action as before. Since this API can be called after data loading, you can now use the data to tag your cache entries. So yeah, here you can use cache like this: fetch the data, loop through it and add a cache tag as well. Defining the lifetime of a cache, if you want to control how longer a particular entry or a page should live in the cache, you can use the cache life API as well. So here is our cache life API. By default it accepts the following values: seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks, and max. Choose a rough range that best fits your use case. No need to specify an exact number, and calculate how many seconds, or was it milliseconds, are in a week. However, you can also specify specific values or configure your own named cache profiles. In addition to revalidate, this API can control the stale time of the client cache as well as expire, which dictates when a page should expire if it hadn't had much traffic for a while. Experimental. This is still very much an experimental project. It is not production ready yet and still has missing features and bugs. In particular, we know we need to improve the error stack for this new type of error. However, if you are feeling adventurous, we would love to hear your early feedback. We will publish a more detailed upgrade path. Aside from memory early errors, the main breaking change here is undoing the default caching of fetch. That said, we recommend experimenting only on greenfield projects at this early experimental stage. If it pans out well, we hope to ship an opt-in version in a minor and make it default in a future major. To play with it, you must be on the canary version of NextJS. You must also enable the experimental dynamic IO flag in next.config.ts, and here you can read more about it. So yeah, that's the caching story for NextJS. Thank you for watching. Bye.